Mario Cristobal just took a flamethrower to Notre Dame's resume.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC and host of Postgame on the Hurricanes radio network. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We're available wherever you get your podcasts. We're on YouTube. We're part of the now #1 Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download FanDuel today. On this loaded episode, we'll answer questions about recruiting and the transfer portal. What are the next moves for Miami? They've just signed the #8 recruiting class in the entire country, by the way. Malachi Tony and Rueben Bain have been honored by the ACC. We'll get into it. We'll talk about the college football playoff precedent that is about to be set. If Miami doesn't make it in, the CFP committee will be doing something they've never done before. But let's talk about a couple things actually that Mario Cristobal said in his news conference on Wednesday. So with Miami being ranked behind Notre Dame, despite the head-to-head victory over the Irish, like the idea behind that is, well, okay, yeah, Notre Dame, they lost to Miami and they lost to Texas A&M, the two best teams that they faced. So those were really good losses, but they've got to be ahead of Miami because of all the amazing things that they did throughout the rest of their schedule, right? The rest of their resume outside of those great losses must have been so incredible for them to be in this spot that they're the 10th ranked team in America. Mario Cristobal yesterday, and this was shared by Cristobalin on X. Here's what Mario Cristobal had to say, actually sending a truth bomb out there to what Notre Dame has done outside of those tremendous losses that they had.
And we've won 10 games, just like, we're being compared to, obviously, to Notre Dame in a lot of different forms and fashions, but the totality of our resume got just as strong or stronger than anybody else. And after their first two losses, right, their resume got stronger, but when you break it down, those 10 games, 2 were against group of 5 opponents. And of the other 8 games, 6 of those games were against defenses that were ranked 105 and beyond, right? 105 to 127. So I think when you start looking at the true facts surrounding a resume and how a resume is actually built, I think all those things will be taken into account. And I respectfully will always provide any and all information to whoever it is necessary so we could have a fair and honest judgment and decision on what is the reality that we're the best and most deserving team.
Wow, so that's Mario Cristobal at his news conference on Wednesday afternoon after National Signing Day. And so, I know Notre Dame fans will come and say, well, Miami, they played Bethune-Cookman. They played all these bad teams. But the point being, nothing Notre Dame did in the rest of their schedule should be enough to disregard the head-to-head loss to Miami. Guess what? Miami has a better win than Notre Dame. We'll talk about Notre Dame's best win in a second. Miami's best win was against Notre Dame, a head-to-head. So let's talk about what the Crying Irish did after they had those great losses. This is why we say Notre Dame's best wins were their losses. Like they had those great losses against Miami and Texas A&M. They fell to 0-2. Here's what the Irish did after that. They beat the 2-10 Purdue Boilermakers 56-30, which means they gave up 30 points against a 2-10 team. They beat 2-10 Arkansas 56-13. I mean, okay, you earned some style points against a 2-10 team. Congrats. They beat 8-4 G5 team Boise State 28-7. As a side note, Miami dominated USF, who dominated Boise State this year. Notre Dame beat NC State 36-7. Miami beat that same team 41-7, by the way. Notre Dame, this was their best win. Their best win all season was against 9-3 USC, 34-24. Their best win came against a non-playoff team. Notre Dame beat Navy, a service academy, Notre Dame beat Pittsburgh 37-15, who Miami beat 38-7. Then, and this is one that they really flex, they beat the 3-8 Syracuse Orange 70-7, who Miami only beat 38-10, but disregarding, when Syracuse played against Miami, not to say Syracuse had any good quarterbacks, but at least Syracuse started a guy who was on a football scholarship, Ricky Collins. Against Notre Dame, Syracuse started a guy on a lacrosse scholarship, and they lost 70-7. And then Notre Dame beat Stanford 49-20, who Miami beat 42-7. So they gave up 20 points against Stanford. So that's the amazing Notre Dame resume. And listen, I'm not saying that Miami played 4 common opponents with them, and I'm not saying that all of Miami's schedule was some crazy gauntlet. But when you consider, because a lot of Notre Dame fans will say things like, well, yeah, okay, we lost to Miami week 1. It was a long time ago, so maybe it shouldn't count. But also, Notre Dame has edges slight edges, by the way, in analytic rankings like the FPI, Bill Connolly's SP+, slightly better strength of record. And I mean slightly. Notre Dame is 1 spot in front of Miami in strength of record, and I think 1 spot in front of Miami in strength of schedule. So they have the edges in all of these analytics. I thought Josh Pate from On3 Sports said it best when he said that, well, the analytic of head-to-head, that should count times 10 compared to all of these other things, that you don't disregard head-to-head because one team has a slight edge in these analytics. And folks, here's the precedent. This is the only time that the CFP committee is weighing those analytics in front of head-to-head, because you look at other cases of teams with head-to-heads in this current college football playoff field. Oklahoma and Alabama, they've got the same 10-2 record. OU is ranked in front of Alabama because OU won the head-to-head. But guess what? Alabama edges out Oklahoma in all of those analytics we talked about. So if they were going to keep the same energy, if Notre Dame is ranked in front of Miami despite the head-to-head because they have edges in those analytics, why isn't the same thing true for Alabama? Well, they lost to Oklahoma. That's the only reason. Now, the case of Texas and Vanderbilt is extremely wacky because Vanderbilt not only has a better record than Texas at 10-2 versus 9-3, Vanderbilt has the edges in all of those analytics, but Texas is ranked in front of them because they won the head-to-head, even though they have a worse record than Vanderbilt. So this is the only time that head-to-head isn't being used. That was another thing that Coach Cristobal talked about on Wednesday. He said, quote, he was asked if Miami still has a chance to get into the playoff. The final rankings come out on Sunday. He said, absolutely. We are very realistic. In the history of the CFP, he said, there's never been a situation where 2 Power 4 or Power 5 teams with the same record that had head-to-head, never has the loser of the head-to-head advanced and the winner been kept behind. The most important thing in all of sports, head-to-head determines a winner or loser. Miami did a great job of game control and settling that on the field. I can rattle off so many stats, he said. When you look at what we did in that game, holding a Heisman candidate to 30 yards, Jeremiah Love, having such a dominant performance up front and common opponents where we were more convincing in 3 of the 4 common opponents, we're playing our best football, have been the last month, margin of victory 28 points. And when you talk about that matchup in the trenches, so Miami's defensive line had Notre Dame's offensive line record their worst Pro Football Focus rating in history. Rueben, Bain, Akeem Mesidor, and company did that. They made Notre Dame's highly touted offensive line not just look mediocre, look terrible when they matched up head-to-head. So Coach mentioned that that's the precedent, right? You've never in a situation had 2 teams with the same record. The loser of the head-to-head gets in and the winner does not. It's never happened before. And you look at the last 2 years of college football playoff committee rankings. I've mentioned this a couple times on Locked On Canes before. In the past 2 seasons, there have been 13 instances of teams with the same record having a head-to-head, and 12 out of those 13 instances, the team that won the head-to-head has been ranked higher, except for this one, this being the lone exception. So this is something we're going to answer questions about this on the other side. Is it still possible, even though the committee has had Miami ranked behind Notre Dame the entire way, it's still possible for them to reverse course when the final rankings come out. You want to keep it locked right here. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Folks, the holidays are officially here, which means gift hunting season is on. And if you want something meaningful, personal, and guaranteed to get a reaction, Aura Frames is the gift that delivers every time. It's not just something you wrap. It's a way to share memories. Because Aura isn't just your average picture frame. Folks, you can preload the frame with photos before gifting it. So when your loved one plugs it in, the memories are already there. No apps to figure out, no setup headaches, just instant smiles. Guys, this is the best gift for your spouse. If you want to give this to your parents, your grandparents, you have some newlyweds in your life, anyone who loves photos is going to love this, guys. Endless uploads of pictures and 30-second videos even through the Aura app. And a personalized message right inside the frame so the gift feels thoughtful the moment that it's opened. Guys, important notes here. Packaging comes gift ready with no price tag, no wrapping needed. It's a huge win. It's a holiday gift that actually gets used, not forgotten in a drawer. Guys, I'm telling you, your loved ones are going to love this. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver matte frames, named #1 by Wirecutter. Use our promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That's AURAFrames.com, promo code COLLEGE. This deal is exclusive to listeners and frames sell out fast, so order yours now to get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. And thank you guys for making the Locked On Podcast Network #1. Couldn't do it without the everydayers. All right, we get a question from Joe from Pennsylvania on the Locked On Canes Insiders chat. By the way, click the link in the show description below if you want to become a Locked On Canes Insider. He says, hey, do you think if Alabama and BYU both win, then Miami and Notre Dame both get left out of the playoff? Yeah, Joe, I would imagine that would, unfortunately for us, it would knock Miami out, but also Notre Dame out. The reason being, Alabama obviously is in the field if it were to end today. If Bama beats Georgia, Bama secures their spot, and Georgia would not fall far enough to fall out of the field. So right there, that puts Miami out. It puts Notre Dame in jeopardy. But then the BYU part of it. Now, BYU, they play Texas Tech this weekend. Texas Tech beat them soundly once already this year. But if BYU wins the rematch, then BYU gets an auto bid. Texas Tech, who's number 4 right now, would not fall out. So, yeah, a BYU victory would knock both Notre Dame and Miami out of the field. I don't believe there's any other way that could play out. So, and I know a lot of Notre Dame fans. And by the way, man, we've all been battling with Notre Dame fans on social media the last several weeks. I've seen some Notre Dame fans like, hey, Miami hates Notre Dame so much. I bet they don't care if they make it to the playoffs. As long as Notre Dame's out, that would make them happy. Well, no, I want Miami to be in. But if both Notre Dame and Miami are out, that would make me happier than just Miami being out and Notre Dame getting in, if that makes sense. Like, I'm going to be, if Miami misses the playoff, I'm going to be upset with the committee no matter what. But I would be even more upset if Notre Dame gets in and Miami doesn't, despite the head-to-head. So they're not exactly right to say that we care more about Notre Dame being out than Miami being in. That's ridiculous. But I would be even more mad if Notre Dame gets in and Miami doesn't versus both teams being out. But I want Miami in. Martin wants to know, if Duke wins the ACC championship, is there a chance that we are picked over Duke as the ACC champ? So my immediate reaction to his question was, it doesn't matter for Miami if Duke wins or loses, because if Duke were to win, they would be an 8-5 conference champ, and there would likely be 2 G5 champions ranked in front of them. So Duke would not make the playoffs, but that wouldn't help Miami, because then you'd get 2 G5, because there are 2 auto bids, right? There are 5 conference champions get in. which means the extra auto bid would just go to another G5 team and it still knocks Miami out. That's my reaction, that it wouldn't help do. But I was listening to Josh Pate the other day, and he brought up this scenario. I don't know if the committee actually cares about this or not, but the scenario would be that with the CFP committee, would they really leave out an entire power conference? That if Duke, because again, if Duke wins the ACC, their resume is still so weak that they probably wouldn't get a bid regardless. So would the committee say, you know what, we've got Miami, who's like right there, probably are a playoff caliber team. Maybe we give them an at-large just to make sure the ACC gets some representation. Yeah, so Pate threw that out there as a possibility. I have a hard time believing the committee is going to show the ACC any sympathy just for the sake of it. If it was the SEC, sure, right? That's the big TV contract with ESPN. If it was Notre Dame, they get all the sympathy, right? But yeah, I don't know if the ACC is going to get that sort of treatment. But, you know, a guy like Josh Pate, he's really knowledgeable. For him to say that, it makes me think. Chris says, how many members of the CFP committee are Catholic? You think it's a conspiracy? I had a Notre Dame fan on X claim that I was trying to make this a papal conspiracy, like the Pope. It goes all the way to the Pope. But you know what? Isn't the Pope American from Chicago? I may have that wrong. I know he's American for sure, but isn't the Pope, he's an American Catholic from the Midwest. It's like a 95% chance he grew up a Notre Dame fan. So this might go all the way to the Vatican. I'm going to be at the Vatican in like 2 weeks, by the way. So I will ask the Pope about this. I will see what he has to say if he's behind this. Jay wants to know, if BYU loses, do the Canes get into the playoff? I think that's our best shot, okay? And I say that because right now, BYU at number 11. That's the buffer between number 10 Notre Dame and number 12 Miami. The committee chair, Hunter Yurachek, who, you know, he contradicts himself so many times. I don't know if you can ever believe a word this guy says, but he did say on Tuesday night that it would be a lot easier to actually weigh the head-to-head Miami has over Notre Dame if they were right next to each other, right? That he brought up the issue of why they haven't weighed the head-to-head to this point is because they've always been separated by teams that are ranked in between them. So, I mean, he implied it, that if Notre Dame were number 10 and Miami were number 11, that maybe then they would have to say, hey, these teams are being directly compared. One of them beat the other. So again, I don't know if I believe him when he says that, but BYU losing to Texas Tech would likely drop them, you know, behind Miami. So I think that would be our best shot, that if Notre Dame was 10, Miami was 11. Now, here's what I would be concerned about, okay? Right now, Alabama is ranked number 9, okay? One spot in front of Notre Dame. Here's the concern. If Alabama were to lose a close game against Georgia, which I think is probably the most likely outcome, I think it's probably going to be a close UGA win. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. Would the committee then drop Alabama from number 9 to number 11 to keep Bama as the buffer between Miami and Notre Dame? So that's their out. Like, oh, well, Bama's between them. We can't judge Miami directly against Notre Dame. So that would be my concern, that they have another buffer between the two teams next week, and it still winds up with Notre Dame making the college football playoff. Dat Dude 239 says, hey, I have a question, but first I must say that Hunter Yurachek, that's the committee chair, is a clown. He contradicts himself all the time. But the question is, do you think the play from Miami's safeties this year will help attract some big-time recruits? I love how, like, the statement that you mentioned had nothing to do with your question. Like, he just wanted to get that out there. I think the committee chair is a clown. And what do you think about Miami's safety play? Yes. So awesome year this year from Jacoby Thomas, from Zechariah Poyser. Yeah, of course. I mean, and also Miami's DB coaches, you know, Will Harris, who focuses on the safeties, has a great reputation. He's a really good recruiter. You know, Coach Etheridge coaching the corners has also done a really good job. But yeah, I think people look at the type of year, and Bryce Fitzgerald, I should mention him, incredible year as a true freshman. I think people can look at that and say, hey, like, if I want to play safety. If I want to play defensive back, Miami again, and Corey Heatherman's defense, of course, that's a great spot to do it. So yeah, I think it absolutely helps. All right, we get questions about what Miami's going to do in the transfer portal, including QB or not QB. That is the question. You want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Folks, NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. And guys, live betting, I think, is great for the ball knowers because you can tell when the momentum is changing. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. Player props update as guys heat up. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast. So can you. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen. For your next listen, make sure you check out Locked On ACC. Kenton Gibbs and I, and sometimes Jackson Holzer, take you around the conference, all the big games, all the big scenarios. I guess we're going to have to talk about that Mickey Mouse of a conference championship game we got. 7-5 Duke against 10-2 UVA. Credit to UVA. They earned it. I know there was a weird thing with UVA where they lost a conference game that wasn't a conference game, but still, Tony Elliott's team had a great season at 10-2. Like, I have no problem with Virginia being there, but Duke at 7-5 because they won some ridiculous 5-team tiebreaker despite having the worst resume. It's a sham of an ACC championship game. And speaking of the ACC, a couple of Miami players have earned the postseason honors that they deserve. Rueben Hurricane Bain wins ACC Defensive Player of the Year. First Miami Hurricane player to win that award. So congratulations to Hurricane Bain. He's a first-team All-ACC defensive end. Started all 12 games this year for the Hurricanes. 37 tackles, 19 solo tackles on the year, 7.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks from defensive end. Has a fumble recovery, an interception, and a pass breakup. Highest graded defensive edge in all of FBS football this season with a 92.9 PFF grade. One of only 10 players in the nation credited with 50 or more quarterback pressures this season. He ranks 5th nationally there. And he's a leader on the Miami defense that leads the ACC and ranks top 15 nationally in total defense, rushing defense, scoring defense, and sacks. Congratulations to Rueben Bain. And I had a conversation earlier, another reason to check out Locked On ACC. I co-host that show with Kenton Gibbs, who's a former defensive lineman at North Carolina State. So, like, Kenton knows what he's watching when he watches defensive line play. I know people have brought up with Rueben Bain, hey, the stats are not as good as we thought. Like, we thought he would have like 15 sacks this year. How come he didn't have all these sacks? Like, Kenton brought up a great point that Bain is such a game wrecker, and opposing offensive coordinators really spent the entire season scheming away from him and scheming in the other direction, but he still affects every play, getting into the backfield and disrupting offenses, that you really can't purely judge Rueben by his stats. Like, you just can't. And that's something coming from a former defensive lineman who's not a Miami fan, who says, watching Rueben Bain, you understand you're watching the best defensive end in the country, even though he had, 4.5 sacks instead of 50.5 sacks that some of you thought that he would have gotten this year. So congratulations to Rueben Bain. Now, the other player who gets deservedly honored is Malachi Toney. Malachi Toney wins both Offensive Rookie of the Year and Overall Rookie of the Year in the ACC. There's not a better freshman in the conference, and I don't believe there was a better freshman in the entire country than Malachi Toney. So congratulations to Toney for getting those awards today as well. We get a question from Will304 who says, what positions do you think Mario Cristobal is going to target in the transfer portal? I think there's going to be definitely needs. I think at linebacker, you're losing a few upperclassmen linebackers to the NFL. I think defensive tackle, Miami's had some success there the last couple of years. This year, David Blay was a major addition. Simeon Barrow was a great one last year. I could see Miami going for possibly a defensive tackle. And, it's controversial for some of you, but I think Miami's probably going to go quarterback shopping again. Now, I like the young guys. Miami just landed 4-star quarterback Darion Coleman. Darion Coleman, like, the way he plays reminds me a lot of Cam Ward. Like, I think he's going to end up being a really good fit, hopefully in Shannon Dawson's offense, because I don't want Dawson to leave. But, whoever Miami's offensive coordinator is a couple years from now, I think Darion Coleman could be the quarterback of the future. I'm also not sleeping on Luke Nickel, who's heading into his redshirt freshman year next year. But these guys are so young. I think the big question this offseason is going to be, it's not going to be comparing transfers to Nickel or Coleman. It's going to be, do we have options in the portal who might give us a better chance to win than Emory Williams or Judd Anderson? Now, to Emory's credit, I think he's really, really improved. And I don't think it's like automatic that you bring in somebody else. But depending on who's out there, right? If Sam Leavitt from Arizona State, if he becomes available, I think he can be one of the top quarterbacks in the entire country here. There are other guys that are a little more polarizing. Lenora Sellers at South Carolina. I know he's had some great ups and some downs the past couple of years, but that's someone who could become available. CJ Bailey of NC State. Now, his coach is staying. Dave Doran is staying, so I think Bailey might very well stay there. But the point is, you're going to evaluate, and I think there is a chance Miami does look at another portal quarterback. It's just, the expectations are going to be there. 10-plus wins every year. Whether or not Miami makes the playoff this year, there's going to be expectation to make the playoff next year. So I think you have to consider which quarterback is going to give you the best chance to win. Is that someone already in the program, or is it somebody from the outside? And Miami and a lot of other teams out there have had great success bringing in junior or senior quarterbacks in the portal. James in the Pines says, from Miami's recruiting class will we see on the field next season? 5-star offensive tackle Jackson Cantwell. I think that's an automatic. I think he's going to be on the field, probably going to start at right tackle. I think a few of these receivers, really good wide receiver class. And I think, obviously the history is there. Miami will use freshman receivers if they earn it. Malachi Toney, Josh Moore and company. Samorian Wingo, who's one of the top receivers in the entire class. Milan Paris, both big-bodied, mature guys. Paris is 6'5.5", 205. I think they could see the field early. J.J. Dunnigan, the safety, 4-star safety out of Kansas. I think he could see the field pretty quickly. Bryce Fitzgerald, of course, just set the mold there. Freshman edge rusher Ashari Charles, I think, could get on the field really quickly. And then don't forget, Miami's also got Hayden Lowe coming off of injury. And, I don't know what exactly is going on with his recovery, but, it was before the season started, he got injured. I think it was the ACL. So you would imagine he's going to be back next year. So Hayden Lowe is going to be like a true freshman essentially next year. And then you could pair him with, guys like Ashari Charles. I think it's going to be really, really good. So I think, as we saw this season, Miami, and I think this recruiting class might even be better than last year's. You're going to see some of these true freshmen get on the field. I don't think there's any question about it. Kay Breezy says, hey, are there any talks of leaving the ACC for Miami or becoming an independent? In terms of becoming an independent, I think the time to do that would have been like 35 years ago. I think it's hard. Notre Dame is an independent, and they've got a massive TV deal, which allows them to have that sort of success. I don't know if I just don't know if there's a path to that for Miami. In terms of leaving the ACC, I don't think you're going to be able to do that for at least another 4 to 5 years. 2030, 2031 is when the buyout to leave the ACC considerably drops down to about $75 million. It was a lot of money, but it's over $150 million if you wanted to leave right now. So once that drops to $75 million in about 5 to 6 years, then maybe you can think about it. But I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. Well, we appreciate everyone for making Locked On Canes your first listen. Make sure you smash the like button and subscribe. We're going to continue campaigning for the next few days. Sunday is when the final CFP rankings come out. Obviously, this weekend, you're rooting for Georgia to win big against Bama, and you're rooting for Texas Tech to win big against BYU. I think both of those things have to happen. Definitely the BYU thing has to happen for Miami to have a shot. So we'll talk to you guys again tomorrow on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the #1 Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.